Hi, I'm Joe Belbruno, live in the Los Angeles Times newsroom. Just like half a mile away from our newsroom is the Los Angeles Convention Center, and right there, about 5,000 union members are here in town for the biggest convention ever, I think, for labor. The AFL-CIO is having their once every 4-year convention to talk about a host of topics, and we're going to talk about what they're doing right now. We've got two people with us. We've got our own Ricardo Lopez, the LA Times economy reporter, and also joining us from The Nation, Josh Idelson. So we'll just start out with both of you. Ricardo, why don't you give us a briefing on what we're seeing right now, what's gone on the last 2 days. The convention opened yesterday with Senator Warren, Elizabeth Warren, speaking, and what has gone on today. Give us a briefing of what we've seen.
Sure, absolutely. So, like you mentioned, this is a convention that happens every 4 years. What's different about this year, though, is that labor kind of finds itself at a crossroads. It's seen its political power kind of wane a bit as union membership is dropped. So this convention is attempting for the first time to bring into the fold potentially 2.5 million new members, folks who belong to worker community groups, justice worker center groups, and other typically non-union members. But so they're trying to formalize some of these alliances in a way that will bring new members and adopt a due structure in order for these groups to be self-sustaining. So and the effort, to align themselves with progressive groups like the NAACP and the Sierra Club is partly to broaden the labor movement, to strengthen it, and kind of achieve the same victories that the Tea Party had achieved a number of years ago. So that's kind of what's been happening. The resolution today was adopted and passed pretty much unanimously to formalize these ties.
And the energy there, I think it's pretty well, energetic, I guess. I mean, I've seen some of the tweets that have gone out. I've seen some of the coverage that you've done. I mean, this is a base that is extremely energized, and they seem to be, really eating it up. I mean, I know yesterday's speech by Senator Warren got a lot of applause afterwards. What's the energy like there, Ricardo?
Sure. Well, Senator Warren is very much beloved by labor. She's they really appreciate or really cheer her stance on Wall Street. She's a tough critic of Wall Street. She's a big proponent for consumer protections. So when she took the stage yesterday, President Rich Trumka introduced her as kind of a big ally of labor, and she kind of received rock star treatment. It was standing ovations, applause, and she really rallied the base here with the idea that together they can help by big, powerful interests and advocate for middle America, basically.
So now here's where the rub comes in. Is this all just sort of preaching to the converted? Let's go to Josh. You've got a really unique perspective. You were formerly a union organizer, I think. Is that correct?
That's right.
Yeah, and so you get these sort of conventions. It is preaching to the converted. This is a union that is in the decline. I mean, unions are just not doing as well as they were in the 50s or 60s or 70s or on. It's been on a decline. In fact, we just had about 40,000 longshoremen leave the AFL-CIO. This is a big convention for Richard Trumka, the president of the AFL-CIO, to rally his base and try to bring in new members into the fold. So, he's got a tough sell ahead of him, doesn't he?
Well, the labor movement is in crisis. We're at a moment where we've certainly seen some unexpected vitality in places like fast food workers going on strike, Chicago teachers beating the political establishment and the media establishment, at least to something like a draw. But at the same time, there's been unexpected vulnerability. There's no question you've seen places that are historic strongholds and even birthplaces of unionism in the U.S., like Michigan, like Wisconsin, become the sites of really devastating defeats. And so Trumka, in internal labor politics, I mean, Trumka was beaming on stage when the United Food and Commercial Workers were welcomed back on. This is one of the unions that had left the AFL-CIO in 2005 and has come back. It is now the second largest of the unions in the AFL-CIO. And so on the internal politics, that's more significant than what happened with the longshore workers, although given the radical history and the militancy of that union, certainly their departure is something that will be watched closely in some circles. In terms of what this means for the direction that Trumka and other labor leaders want to take the AFL-CIO, there's the most public part of the conversation, which is about reaching out and opening up, as Ricardo was suggesting. On the one hand, closening ties with other progressive groups, be it environmentalists or civil rights groups or feminist groups, working more closely on areas of local and national policy. And on the other hand, working more closely with what I've called alt-labor groups, which are labor organizations that aren't unions. Labor organizations, at least, that are not unions as we think of them under U.S. law, that aren't bargaining collectively with a boss, but are seeking other ways to organize workers and have some kind of leverage. And the AFL-CIO has been backing groups like these over the past few years, but is committing itself to work more closely with them. And that's something that says a lot about the direction of labor and also the way that work is changing, that more and more people in the U.S. who work aren't even considered employees under the law with the option of collective bargaining.
And so what do you think the biggest challenges for them over the next 2 days? What message do they have to get out to this base so that then, in turn, they can go out and begin broadcasting that message to unions and union members and potential members as well?
Well, I think the most interesting resolution that isn't getting talked about in most of the coverage is a resolution that passed today that commits each of the unions in the AFL-CIO to provide a confidential report to the AFL-CIO about what kind of organizing they're going to do over the next year. The dirty secret that isn't very secret is some unions are much more effective and dynamic than others when it comes to engaging more members. And there's a view among many academics, many veterans of the AFL-CIO, that the Federation has really moved away from an emphasis on organizing campaigns against bosses and towards a focus on devoting its resources to politics. The AFL-CIO contests that. But this question of can the Federation, which in many ways is more the servant than the master of the individual unions, can it get people moving in the same direction in terms of organizing more workers? And if people leave with more of a sense of urgency and more of a sense of strategy to do that, that would be of real significance, even if the public message the Federation is putting out is primarily about its role as part of a larger progressive movement, which of course is also controversial and significant in labor history and today.
And you were talking earlier about big defeats for labor in other states. And Ricardo, I know that you sat down with Rich Trumka last week and got to hear what he had to say. Why are they having this annual, once every 4-year meeting? Why are they having it here in LA? What significance does Los Angeles have for the unions?
Sure. Well, basically, California's kind of bucked the trend nationally when it comes to union membership. The most recent statistics from the Bureau of Labor, from the Department of Labor, shows that California actually added members, whereas nationally union membership declined. Part of the reason is just the demographics of the state. The other part, it's solidly democratic. Labor has a really strong dynamic movement here. Most recently there were victories with local car wash locations where workers won the right to collectively bargain and unionize. So it's a much different picture here. So in some ways, Rich Trumka says that it makes sense to come to LA, which is almost a hotbed of the labor movement here. Last year, laborers were able to beat back Prop 32, and so the union saw that as a big victory for them. So it makes sense to have Los Angeles host the AFL-CIO convention this year.
Yeah, and we're missing one last topic on that. Why here in Los Angeles? And Josh, maybe you could fill us in. I think yesterday they had some resolutions, or maybe it was today. They talked about immigration, and that's been a big topic for them. Josh, how does immigration fall into having it here in LA, and what are the unions saying about it? What's the message they're trying to get out about that?
So the head of the Los Angeles County Federation of Labor, one of the most significant regional bodies in the AFL-CIO, Maria Elena Durazo, has argued that immigration is the game changer that people thought the Employee Free Choice Act would be. That if you get a sufficiently progressive immigration reform, where millions of workers are no longer undocumented, the argument is then the boss no longer has that as a weapon to wield over them, to try to stop them from organizing, and then you don't have as much of a two-tier labor system where everybody's standards can be pushed down. And others, like the Solicitor of Labor, have suggested if that reform passes, you could see an upsurge in organizing by immigrants who already have been at the forefront of many of the big union organizing victories in recent years. And so the Federation and many of its unions have put a tremendous amount of resources and attention into pushing for immigration reform and have been squarely behind the Senate immigration bill. There was a confrontation, I reported at The Nation, between a couple further left activists, and both Rich Trumka, the head of the AFL-CIO, and Valerie Jarrett, as he was escorting her out. Those couple activists were suggesting that the Senate immigration bill is not sufficiently progressive. But the mood among most of the folks you talk to in the labor movement is that this is something that would spur more organizing as well as being a basic issue of justice and humanity.
Right. So let's look ahead a little bit. We've got today the Secretary of Labor is going to be speaking.
Actually, that's tomorrow, Joe. Sorry.
Oh, is it tomorrow? Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So we've got 2 more days left of this, right? Or is it 3? Is it close on Wednesday?
It closes on Wednesday.
Okay, so we've got 3 more days of this. Look ahead, both of you, and we'll start with Ricardo. What are we seeing? What are going to be the highlights over the next 3 days for the folks that have gathered at that convention?
Well, it's interesting because, with almost every, I've heard Rich Trumka speak a couple times, and every time he kind of says the convention is, once the convention closes, it's not the end of what they're trying to do, rather it's the beginning, because up until this point, in the months leading up to the convention, there have been listening sessions, labor leaders and other of these allied groups have come together to kind of hammer out the resolutions that are being debated on and adopted or voted on at the convention. So going forward, what they really will have is a framework, with these specific goals and specific ways into doing them. So they're going to basically put into action the plan that they're finalizing at the convention. So moving forward, you can probably expect to see more formal cooperation between the different groups as they're brought in as members. And so what they really want to do, and according to the language of one of the resolutions that were adopted today, they really just want to open up the labor movement to any worker who wants to join it.
And Josh, what do you see going forward over the next few days? They lost the star power. Barack Obama was going to speak. I think he was originally scheduled for today. I don't know if he's going to do it remotely or it's a videotape, but they kind of lost that star power. What do you see going forward? What's really going to energize these folks over the next 3 days?
Well, I expect that Tom Perez, the Secretary of Labor, tomorrow will get a very warm reception, as Valerie Jarrett did on Sunday. It was noteworthy that she got a very warm reception, but people who criticized the administration from the left also got tremendous applause, at least at the diversity pre-conference that opened up the AFL-CIO's day. Going forward, I would say watch the mass incarceration resolution. This is really a new stance for the AFL-CIO as a federation to come out strongly against mass incarceration and talk about it as something that fuels racial injustice in the United States. People here see that as very much tied to the federation's ability to be a stronger partner to other progressive groups, taking a strong stance on that issue. There are a number of resolutions, some from AFL-CIO leadership and some from outside of it, on politics, including groups that are pushing a further left position. On the other hand, a resolution from the building trades that would emphasize the Federation's willingness to support moderate Republicans and to talk specifically about so-called worker issues, in other words, a narrower political agenda. And so there is a tension there which we could see play out, as well as a resolution we're expecting on health reform, which could represent some of these tensions we've seen around Obamacare implementation.
Well, very good. It sounds like there's some noise in the background there. It looks like they're going to get started again at the AFL-CIO 2013 convention. Thank you very much, Josh, for joining us here.
Thank you very much.
And Ricardo, thank you very much. Good luck with your reporting today. I'm Joe Belbruno, Deputy Business Editor of the LA Times. Thank you for joining us in this Google Hangout, and tune in to latimes.com all day for updates on what's going on at the AFL-CIO and other news. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining us, and good luck over the next 3 days.
Thank you.
Thank you.
How are you?